Educational Media Services present Ukraine, It's Not Russia, an introduction for Americans. Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe. Only Russia's European territory is larger. At 233,000 square miles, Ukraine is slightly smaller than the state of Texas. It shares borders with Moldova and Romania to the southwest, Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland on the west, Belarus to the north, and Russia on the east. Its southern coast provides access to the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Ukraine's population is just over 52 million people, roughly the same number as the combined populations of California and Texas. Ukraine's history can be traced back to the establishment of Kievan Rus in the 9th century. In 988 AD, Kiev's ruler Vladimir the Great converted to Christianity and oversaw the mass baptism of the city's entire population in the river Dnieper. Because of its strategic position, Ukraine would be conquered and governed by many competing groups over the centuries, including all too brief periods of self-rule. In the 20th century, Ukraine was made a part of the Soviet Union. Joseph Stalin's policies of industrialization, collectivization, and forced deportation created great turmoil in Ukraine. These policies resulted in a terrible famine in the 1930s that killed an estimated 5 to 7 million Ukrainians. Only a decade later, the Germans under Adolf Hitler would invade Ukraine in a push towards securing the Soviet Union's vast natural resources. Many battles were fought on Ukrainian soil. Millions died on the battlefield, including countless civilians. Towns and villages were destroyed by both the Germans and Soviets in order to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. Ukrainian Jews and others were rounded up for extermination by the Nazis. Over 2 million Ukrainians were also sent to Germany as slave laborers. In a war that saw much suffering, Ukraine was one of the areas that suffered the most. In April of 1986, Ukraine was the site of the worst accident in the history of nuclear power, near a town named Chernobyl. An explosion in Unit 4 spewed massive amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. Millions of acres of forest and farmland in Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia were contaminated. Although the initial accident killed 32 people, untold numbers would be affected by the contamination and would later develop illnesses and cancers caused by it. This included many first responders and tens of thousands of normal Ukrainians conscripted into the cleanup efforts by Soviet authorities. Although the 20th century was dominated by such incredible hardship by the Ukrainian people, it ended with a note of hope. The breakup of the Soviet Union brought national independence to Ukraine in 1991. The shift to private ownership and democracy would not be easy. Often, state resources would be awarded to individuals with special contacts at below-market prices. These deals were not only unfair in practice, but also denied the emerging Ukrainian state from much-needed income and capital. In 2005, the fourth presidential election of the newly democratic Ukraine was rocked by turmoil. Pro-Russian Viktor Yanukovych was initially declared the winner over the more pro-Western Viktor Yushchenko. Yushchenko had recently been the victim of severe dioxin poisoning in a case that is still unsolved. Voting irregularities and outright fraud led to an Orange Revolution, in which supporters of Yushchenko staged mass demonstrations. The results were thrown out, and in a new ballot, Yushchenko was declared the winner. 3 years later, President Yushchenko's popularity has declined. Political infighting, particularly with former Orange Revolution ally and Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko, and very real problems at home and abroad have dissatisfied many Ukrainians. The future of Ukraine and its relations with regard to Europe, the United States, and Russia provoke many more questions than answers.
Cool.